Hey everybody, welcome back to another candid conversation with your CPA. Today I have Douglas Slaybough with me, a coach to the accounting industry. He comes by, professional background as a CPA on the audit side, with PwC and a couple other firms. But I'll kick it over to you, Doug, Coach Doug, to introduce yourselves to the audience.
So I am a CPA and a professional coach today. I started my career at Arthur Anderson. I stayed there for a couple of years. I left before it fell, and I went to run a construction company in Aspen. It was a place that I
Nice.
grew up, and I was a sheet metal worker, and I put on roofs and gutters and HVAC. And the owner wanted me to come in and help run it with him, and did that for a couple of years. I met my wife in Denver though, and she wasn't as much of a mountain girl as she was a city girl. And so she tolerated being in the mountains for a period of time. The job didn't turn out to be what I wanted to, and so we packed up, went back to the city. I went to Price Waterhouse for a couple of years. Turns out Price Waterhouse and I don't get along very well. We have a different idea on certain things, and I went, let's say, 2 years without a raise or a bonus, and I was working like 2,700 hours a year. And mostly because I'm stubborn and I wasn't communicating the way they wanted me to. And so they kept giving me feedback like, you need to let us know what you're doing. You need to keep us informed of what's going on. And it wasn't like I wasn't doing anything. I just wasn't telling anyone what I was doing.
Yeah.
So they were trying to get the message across. And so they messed with my comp. And after 2 years, I decided that was enough. And I went to a regional firm that no longer exists. Plant Moran bought it. I was a partner there on the audit side for about a decade. And while I was there, I was one of the called co-founder of this coaching program within the firm. So we built
Okay.
this program so that all the professionals would have a coach, and they would get coaching throughout the year to support them in their careers and in their personal lives too. And I led this program. I trained the coaches. I trained the coachees how to receive coaching. And the funny thing was, is I'd like never read a book. I'd never taken a class on coaching. I was just using this word to describe, me being interested in others, having some empathy, having some compassion, really wanting to see people be successful in their careers. But I was using the word coach and really not understanding that there's more meaning to it than I thought. But I
Hmm.
rolled that program out. I ran it for I don't know however long, 7 or 8 years, maybe longer. I don't know. And right around 2014, I had a bit of a called a midlife crisis where
Okay.
I started to kind of reflect on who I was being and what I was giving to the world and my value and my purpose. And I felt that it was a little bit more than what I was doing. So signing audit reports is a valuable thing if you're a bank or the SEC or a shareholder. Um, and the money was great, so I was able to support my family and do the things that I was doing. But there was just kind of an emptiness, and I also recognized some things, some very clear and obvious things that I was doing that I wasn't proud of, who I was becoming and being. So,
Hmm.
went to like 6 months of soul searching, decided that I needed to change. And I looked at this coaching thing that I like so much, and I said, "Well, wonder what it would like to do that." And reached out to a bunch of executive coaches, had conversations. They told me, it's great, it's wonderful, and you can make all kinds of money, which I've learned most of them were full of shit to some extent. Um, and then I
Right.
sat down with my wife and I said, honey, I think I want to become a coach. And she said, you're going to be really good at it. And I said, okay. And I said, but our income is going to go from here way up high to zero in a weekend. And
Yeah.
uh, and so that was a little scary. And so I started the CPA coach in 2016. And the CPA coach, first of all, I went to school to become a coach. I got certified as a coach. They don't have licenses for coaches like they do for like psychologists or doctors. They have credentials and certifications, very much like a CPA. It's not licensed by a state or certified by a state, so it's very much a wild west of
Yeah.
industries right now, and like pretty much anyone can call themselves a coach and sell coaching, and that's good and bad. It's good because it's there's a lot of opportunity to be a coach, and you don't need to do a lot to become one. And it's bad because there's a lot of people running around out there calling themselves coaches that
Yep.
really have no, they shouldn't be out there doing it. They're not qualified. They're creating a bad name for what we do. They're being unprofessional. They're not being ethical. But to be a certified coach, you have to take CPE just like a CPA. You have to take tests just like a CPA. You have to take ethics just like a CPA. You have kind of a governing body just like CPAs do. So it's very much been turned into much more of a recognized profession, professional profession. And so anyway, I did all that. I started the CPA coach, and since then, I've been mostly coaching accountants. And there's three varieties of accountants I work with. I work with the public accountant. That's someone who's in a big firm, typically kind of in that upper echelon, in that senior manager, future leader, or partner or managing partner. And then I also work with private accountants, which are more of the CFO controller types, and supporting
Mhm.
them in their businesses and careers. And then one of my favorites is the independent accountant. And that is more of a, what was the term I heard the other day? SOHO, uh, a single owner home office accountant. So, I like to work with those independent accountants who have a very small office, maybe themselves and maybe another partner, maybe a few staff that are really, adopting that entrepreneurial lifestyle, business style. And so I coach them, and that's what I've been doing for the last almost 9 years. And then about 2 years ago ish, the problem with coaching is I only get to work with one person.
Yeah,
So,
like one
I'm
people
sitting
on a
there,
first group.
right. So, I'm sitting across someone. I get to focus on them, help them get whatever they want to get in their lives and careers and support them. But there's just a lot of people I can't influence outside of that experience.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
my purpose is to, enhance the experience of public accounting for accountants. And so I'm really limited if I can only do that one at a time. So a couple of years ago, we started, we meaning my partner Dan Predovich and I started the practicing accountant. And the practicing accountant is a different vehicle. It still includes me, the CPA coach in it. But in this business, we're trying to reach more. So, kind of like this, we have a podcast. We've got like 50 episodes or so of that recorded and out there on Apple, Spotify, whatever. Um, and in those moments, I'm able to hopefully reach a wider audience with some of the things I've learned from coaching CPAs most of my career. Whether it be pricing or strategies or business development or personal development or improved performance or whatever it might be. I'm able to speak to those things in this podcast as well as Facebook group. We've got a few thousand people in a Facebook group that we reach out to. Well, we're kind of part of this movement that's going on right now where there's a lot of
Right.
influencers stepping into private accounting or independent accountants' lives. And a lot of them have some level of experience with accounting, but a lot of them are just marketing majors that have
Yeah, I
focused their
saw that
attention.
already.
Yeah, but it's, I mean, these are folks that have never, signed a return or an audit report that are telling CPAs how to run their business and how to, work less and make more. And now I get it. Sometimes it's nice to have a fresh approach and perspective in how we do what we do. But it also annoys the hell out of me sometimes when, the
It's easy to
credibility of
say.
some of these folks is really lacking.
Hmm.
And so we create a place in the practicing accountant that's, it's got a credibility all day long. Dan runs a firm. I've owned firms. We're in a position to really speak to, this group of not just empathy, not just with data, not just with training, but with real experience. And we're just trying to help everyone have a better experience. Like that, at the end of the day, we want accountants to stay in this profession and build this industry up, and we just love to help however we can. So that was a really long-winded response to a
No,
pretty
it was
simple
fine.
question.
No, it wasn't. It helps kind of bring everything together because like a lot of the audience for this episode are going to be CPAs, accountants, finance people, and
Yeah.
so we're very risk adverse, and so and knowing that like you have a background in very natural transition, CPA, managing CPA, leading CPAs, I should probably start coaching CPAs. And then not just on how to do that, but also the practicing accountant, where it's kind of the way I kind of heard that is like the business side of owning your business. If you are a Soho, which like I think it is very much a movement, like there's
Mhm.
with advances in softwares and communication preferences, it's pretty logical to be single operator, home office based, and do all of your accounting, financial services for your clients. We just need remote access to their softwares or view only access. So, no, I appreciate you breaking down kind of your background. And I guess like starting out serving, just coaching CPAs, whether they're, and I like that you serve, larger firm CPAs that are operating in it, private company, finance people as well as the smaller operators. But busy season is upon us. We know that's like a hot button topic with a lot of anybody who's been a CPA. That like, if you know, you know. And then the CPAs that are still in it. Like I was speaking with one last week, like it's still very much, despite all of the advances in technologies, it's still a grind. And so I guess like from your perspective, like what makes busy season so tough for just people that don't really know, but then also the CPAs within it, just so they can kind of be reminded they're not alone. But like, what makes busy season so tough for these CPAs and accountants?
That's a loaded question and
I
plenty
respect
to
your honesty. It
contribute
is a
to
loaded
that. So
question.
just go ahead and, don't just skip the softballs, just go straight for the fastball, huh? That's how it works around
Yep,
here.
yep.
um, so one of the biggest problems with busy season is that firms don't manage capacity. They have this mentality of we'll get it done or we'll figure it out. And they continue to let work come in, even though the doors should be shut and locked and the windows closed and the closed for business sign, no vacancies should be hung, but they continue to say, sure, we'll do that because they're people pleasers. They're not planning very well. They know that they've got resources and hey, there's a Sunday that we can always use if we need to get some of this work done. So they don't manage capacity. Like there's no um forecast of capacity that firms are using that I've seen at least commonly every once in a while, and my clients especially, they step back and they say, okay, let's walk the next 18 weeks. Let's make sure how many resources do we have, how many hours are available, and how much business do we have, and let's see if there's a delta. Let's see if there's actually room to sell work, and let's see if there's not. And if there's not, lock the damn doors. But then the phone call will come in and then someone in the firm will say, it's 20 grand. I mean, why would we say no to that? That's going to go straight to the bottom line. We don't have to hire anyone else. Meanwhile, that falls on the backs of everyone. So
Mhm.
capacity and not measuring it, I think, is a big contributor to the pain of busy season.
No,
I
that
think
makes
another
sense.
one,
And
yeah,
yeah, yeah, if you
right.
got another one, yeah, fire away.
Another one is a Parkinson's law. Have you heard of Parkinson's law before?
No, I haven't. What is
So
that?
you will after I tell you. But it's this concept, and it came out a long time ago, like 30s or 40s. And this
Okay,
guy was writing about government, mostly in bureaucracies. And he came up with this, he identified this law, and that law is that work expands to fill the time you allow for it. So
okay.
I'll say it again, work expands to fill the time you allow for it. So, like if you have a meeting for 60 minutes, right? And everyone comes into the room and you sit down and you start bullshitting, like, how was your weekend? What'd you think of the football game? Who you picking this weekend? 15 minutes goes by, and then you actually start talking about whatever the meeting's about, and maybe there's an agenda that actually drives the conversation. And let's say that conversation starts to wind down 45 minutes in, but we've got 15 minutes left, right? So we might as well use that to catch up about our summer plans and how Sally did in the basketball game and what's Johnny up to these days. And you just fill the space unnecessarily because it's available. And I think in busy season, we tend to fill a lot of space with work that doesn't need to be done because we have the time. And we say, well, you know what? I've got Saturday. So what do? We save work for Saturday that we could have gotten done on Tuesday.
Oh, that is so real. Yeah, for sure. And it's
I
we
had
work Sunday, so it's like, well, it's a 6-day standard week with a half day on
right.
Sunday. So like I don't gotta worry about it today.
I'll
Like
just
let's just
hang out and wait. Like I
oh,
had a
okay.
rule that I had for clients, and I said, listen, if you want to make a better busy season, buy a ski pass, set a goal for the number of ski days you're going to get this year, and stick to it. And I guarantee you, you'll be more efficient every week with your time because you're thinking, I want to be on Vail on Saturday, not in the office eating pizza from last night,
Oh, leftovers, they're everywhere. It's so hard to not gain weight.
right? Totally.
But to your point, no, that is a thing. Okay, no, the Parkinson law work expands to fill the time allotted, and because for whatever reason, I don't know when it got started, but busy season is just everybody knows it's 6.5 days, 60 to 80 hour work weeks is the standard. If you're less than like 55, 60, it's like hey, it's busy season. Let's get these numbers up. To your point, we already planned to fill this time with work. And so,
Use
no,
it,
that's definitely a real
even though you don't
thing.
need it. Well, I used to have teams and I used to sit down with them. I'd say, okay, like an audit team. And I'd say, all right, what are the chances of us getting this audit done in a day? And everyone in a room's looking at me like I'm nuts, and it's impossible, Doug, and we cannot get an audit done in a day. My response was, well, it's possible. It might create a lot of risk for us as a firm for me to sign this report at the end of the day and say this
Yeah.
audit's done, but that doesn't mean I couldn't. And that doesn't mean that we couldn't structure our day where we brought in a bunch of resources just to focus on this audit. We hit the high risk areas really hard with the time we had. We had the client teed up. We had, everything just put together so that in one day we could get this audit done. And, a couple of them are like, yeah, sure, Doug, but that's really unlikely. And I was like, well, that's not my point. My point is if I give you 3 weeks to do this audit, guess how long it's going to take you to do this audit? 3
3 weeks.
weeks. And if I give you a week to do this audit, guess how long it'll take you to do this audit? 1 week. And so we have to make sure that whatever work we're putting into it, we're intentional about. And so that time is not just something that we fill.
Okay, and then this is a good segue into the next topic because I was just talking with a person about this, and definitely she's still fully in busy season, and it kind of came up of like, we're a little bit out of it. We serve clients, and so like for us, we if we get the work done, to your point, we go to the ski resort or we just bring in more work, but we get paid for that work. Whereas like if you're a well salaried employee at a CPA firm, like just because you crush all the work and start to become a rock star, deliverable, you almost kind of get resentful after a while because like your reward for getting your work done early on some of these CPA firms is just more work. And so then to your point, like you're for sure not gonna tell anybody you got it done on time, let alone maybe even get it done like, early. You're like, well, I'm not gonna get it done early. And so like with that in mind, like how does CPA firms kind of think through promoting staff? Because like that was kind of always a tiff as well of like, well, you say I got to work really hard to get promoted, but then all I am seeing is just more work. So I want to like hit my 70 hours, but then just still get promoted. So like, how do you see CPA firms like handling the promotion and has anything changed in the way that CPA firms promote their staff kind of over the years and or where does it need to go?
Well, the hope is, and unfortunately, we're still not there yet. The hope is, the amount of work you do is no longer the badge of honor that it's always been. What you
Okay.
produce should be a badge of honor. I was able to get through this much work in the time that we had, but ours, in the past has been, this thing you brag about. The
Yep.
reports come out Monday morning and you look to see if you're at the top having the most chargeable hours. I was that guy. And I'd walk around with a little bit of a, kind of a gait and a step just to know that I was the guy number one with the most billable hours. Meantime, I was barely sleeping and I was eating that nasty pizza and I hadn't seen my wife and kids. But I think to get promoted and to have opportunities for promotion, you have to understand what the next level requires of you. Like you have to understand what is the job description of the level ahead of me. And the first thing you do is you have to master the role you're in. And that doesn't mean work more. That means understand how to run the engagement, how to lead a team, how to review, how to coordinate, how to organize, how to manage, whatever the role calls for that you're in. You have to nail that, master it, and then slowly start taking little pieces of the role above you away from the people above you so that you get the experience doing it. The next thing you know, you accidentally find out you're actually doing their job and the promotion comes extremely easy. Problem is, firms don't always do a good job of describing the specific roles and responsibilities of the different levels. And so promotion becomes
Yeah.
somewhat of a unknown. It's easier like staff, senior manager, those are pretty clear. But once you start getting into senior manager or partner equity or non-equity, that's when it becomes very nebulous and vague as to what is necessary to get to the next level. But the opportunity though is the base promotion off of not just hours, but of production. How efficiently are they getting their work done? And not because we gave them more and produced more with this one individual, but they got done what they said they were going to. They did what we assigned them. They may have gone early on a Friday. That doesn't mean we don't promote them.
Right, right. It's like, God forbid we, get excited about efficiency and effectiveness. Um, no, that makes sense. And I think that's a good segue kind of, again, just into this other topic of like, I remember, back at the day was when I was still with the CPA firm, it was always like, we're trying to become the trusted advisor to our clients, but we also like, we need to become leaders before we become trusted advisors. And so again, just like, thinking through CPAs, because we're not the most like gregarious people if we were to stereotype a little bit, but how does CPAs, and myself included, because like I definitely got passed on a promotion. I still think about it to this day, but like how do we hold ourselves back as leaders and trusted advisors? Kind of as CPAs trying to, we are fairly driven. That's why we didn't just stop with a master's. We had to get the CPA license, and then that wasn't enough. Now we had to hit manager. Now we had to work for like a bigger client of ours. So like everybody's fairly driven, but I feel like we inherently hold ourselves back either as leaders or becoming that trusted advisor to our clients. Like at a high level, like from your coaching background, like where do you see us as CPAs holding ourselves back as leaders or trusted advisors?
I think you first of all have to understand we're talking about two different skill sets.
All right.
Being a CPA, tax audit, independent, private, whatever, like that is a set of skills that allows you to be that person. You're detail focused, you can lead, you can manage, you're focused on efficiency, you're able to get project management, boosts to your engagement and help them get through whatever they're trying to do. There's a certain skill set for the CPA. Then there's a skill set for the advisor, and it's different. They're not the same. But I think a lot of CPAs just try to take the same skill set and apply it in this TBA, this trusted business advisor role. But that's not it. Like a
Yeah.
TBA is someone who is very curious, is not always problem solving, is focused on building a relationship, a strong, deep relationship with clients, is someone who's willing to admit when they're wrong or right and be open to there being other solutions than the ones they themselves would propose. There's someone who's going to be looking and thinking about their clients beyond compliance season. They're as worried about them in June as they are in March. There's someone who doesn't just slip away. There's someone the client wants to come back because of how much value they provide every time they show up. And instead of just asking questions about how was the return and let's go through last year's numbers again, there's someone who's talking about the future and wondering what's keeping them up at night, what kind of help and support they might need, even if they themselves aren't the one to provide it. So it's two different skill sets, and we tried to mash them together, and so it's and until we really isolate and it doesn't have there's no universal answer here, but
Yeah.
what to an accountant, what's the difference between being a CPA for a client or an accountant for a client versus an advisor and recognize the different skill sets?
No, that's fair. And that's one of those things too, is like we have to admit that they're different skill sets, or otherwise you're gonna be like an auditor and a tax person trying to just mash that into a business of like, well, this is valuable, right? Because it's valuable once a year to get your audit done and file taxes. It's like, no, like the actual like value day to day is like how do we drive profits, expand profits, critically plan for our future needs, whether it is capital or manpower or regulatory changes, and then yeah, that's kind of how I think about it too. Is like CPAs, we're exclusively looking backwards and auditing the past historical financial statements, not even to make sure they're good, just to make sure they're accurate and complete. They could be losing money hand over fist, but as long as the accounting is complete and accurate, we're happy. And like same with the taxes. It's like, well, as long as the financial statements are complete and accurate, I can file the taxes, compliantly, we're good. It's like, and tax strategy gets a little bit into the future thinking, but it's there's only thinking of the tax strategy. It's not thinking of the operating strategy and the capital management strategy. And like to your point, it's a skill set that needs to be appreciated because yeah, we're like just feeding CPAs to the wolves, being like, go become a trusted advisor for your
Right?
client of 7 years. It's like,
And they have
well,
no
I don't
idea
know.
what that
Do they need
means.
more audits or taxes? It's like, no, they need all the stuff day to day that drives, profits, which
I
that
had
makes
a
sense.
I had a
Um,
conversation with a professional last week on this topic of how do I become an advisor.
yeah,
And, my suggestions to her were, number one, anytime that the partner, because she wasn't a partner yet, anytime the partner is on the phone with the client, you need to be in the room. And if they
yeah,
go to a lunch with them, if they have a meeting, if they go in front of the board or the audit committee, you need to be with them. You need to see how they operate and what they provide the client beyond what you might expect them to be providing. And then I think the second thing was you need to pick one or two clients where you do role reversals. And you put yourself into more of a partner seat before you are a partner and feel that weight of managing a relationship and pleasing that client and
yeah.
supporting them beyond just what you think is normally done, just creating those perspectives. But to your point, and the same thing in private industry, controllers are fantastic at looking in the rearview mirror. CFOs need to spend more time looking out the windshield, and it's the same thing as you're moving through from that CPA to that advisor, you gotta change your viewpoint.
No, that's a cool way to think about it. I appreciate that because yeah, like we kind of live in that world. But yeah, taking a like a perspective of just like thinking about like the accounting profession and because it is a way client service and like properly being involved in your clients like because if their business is going down, it should stress you out if you literally have the weight of your client's business is like the front of your mind. Which in that case, you can't have dozens and dozens of businesses because you'd freaking drive yourself crazy. But that's like, a different conversation of like, what is a good workload and what do we do versus, how much audit and tax clients do we keep versus like real like advisory services clients? Because like the larger CPA firms do a much better job of just separating them. They have whole teams that are just
Right.
consultants and advisories, and then they have their standard assurance and tax practices. But when we get into these smaller regional CPA firms, which I know I was a part of one, it's kind of like all hands on deck. It's like if they'll pay us to do advisory stuff, like yeah, just say you're also an advisor. But it's like I'll try, but like I'm still just an auditor. But it's like, but it's a mindset as well of like, hey, like you're gonna take on a little bit of the weight of like the responsibility of your client's business, even though it's not your business. But overall, you'll feel a lot more fulfillment. You'll have a better like relationship with the client, and so because then you also get the weight of the upside. And so if the client has a killer year, you're like, oh, sweet, like we had a killer year.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas like if you're just doing an audit, you got to come back in and you just do
Mm.
another audit, and like it's like all right, I signed another audit report, but
Well,
I
it's
don't really
such
do
a,
anything.
I mean, part of my midlife crisis was just recognizing how valuable is an audit. And,
Yeah, let's riff on
I kind
that.
of went through that mind space and it scared me because I was like, well, it's not. And I was like, whoa, hang on. They're paying a lot of money for it. I mean, it's got to be worth something. I was like, well, at the end of the day, an audit's to check the box. It's did you get the audit done? Yes. Do you have the
Was it a
report?
clean
Yes.
opinion?
Was it a clean
Yep.
opinion? Yes. And was it a reputable firm? Yes. And then it's like, okay, moving on. They take the audit report, they open the desk and they stick it in there and close it, and that's it for the year. And
Yep.
that, that's another conversation probably to have, but that advisor role, that's not something you put in a drawer and it's not something you check the box on. It's something that permeates throughout the year. It's something that continues to create opportunities for you. It's not something they have to do with you. It's things that they actually are encouraged, want to, and are excited to work with you on versus the
Yeah.
thing they have to do.
And it's like a desire versus a requirement. And it's like,
Hmm.
too bad. I mean, if we didn't have to pay taxes, a lot of companies wouldn't. Like, I know it's good. We should pay taxes. It helps
Sure.
society. We need roads. We need schools. But like overall, it's a
Sure.
compliance thing.
Right.
And the goal is to pay as little as legally possible. And so it's kind of like similar to audits. It's like tax returns of like, how valuable is this? It's like, well, it's kind of, but it's, we gotta take like a little bit more of like an introspective consideration of just like, all right, like how valuable is this? And I guess like kind of on that in that same vein, it's like that's kind of does become a decision making of like, well, do I stay on the auditor partner track or do I go on
Mhm.
the partner track of the CPA firm or do I go it on my own? Or the third option is like, do I join the finance or accounting team of one of my clients or, one of, just a company? And so I guess like you've kind of, yeah, thought through this quite a bit. So like, I guess, how should a CPA think through this? Like everybody's situation is different, but why I like you is like your answer isn't just get out of a CPA firm as quickly as
Mhm.
possible. And like selfishly, I kind of always just leaned on that of like, well, once you know what you're doing, freaking get on and get lost because the smart ones move on. And but it's like, no, 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 Ray. There's tons of intelligent CPAs that work for awesome CPA firms. I have friends that are in the industry. And so I guess like how do you think through that, Doug, of like how do you help somebody think through should I stay with this CPA firm or go to a different CPA firm or go private or go out on my own? Like, what are there like a standard thought processes or how do you kind of weigh that?
Well, and the first thing I ask clients that come to me that are trying to make what I call the career decision, I ask them, have you made the decision or not? And, usually they'll kind of pause and hesitate on that. And I'll say, okay, I can feel a little bit of unsure on that. So like out of 100%, what percentage are you sure that you want to make a move? And they'll usually come up with 80 or 90%. I said, great, let's just hang out there. And the first thing I want to do is I want to create some self-awareness as to what's going on. Like, what are they feeling? What are they experiencing? What are they
Yeah.
thinking about or wishing they were doing? Like, I want to create awareness where they're at before we make any move about what they're experiencing so we can articulate it. Once we have that, that gives us an opportunity to recognize whether or not those things are available where they're at. It's a lot easier to stay where you are than have to go find a job. cheaper,
Yeah.
less scary, less stressful. It's like there's divorce, there's buying a house, and there's changing jobs as being, some of the more stressful things you can do in your career in life. So create that awareness, recognize what it is that we could change. We need to create what's called a stay interview, which is when you sit down with an employer and you say, you know what, I'm kind of in a place where I'm thinking about my options. And one of the things I really like about this place is blah blah blah. And one of the
Mhm.
things, or some of the things I really wish I could change would be blah blah blah, whatever it is. And you share that with your employer with the hope that there's some chance that they want to retain you and they're willing to meet you in the middle somewhere and give you more of what you want. Sometimes it's pay, sometimes it's hours, sometimes it's who you work with. But if
Right.
they're
Process.
receptive to that, if they're
Hmm.
open to it, then you move to job crafting. And job crafting is where you either adjust the tasks, the relationships, or the cognitive perspective you have of the work that you do in a more favorable light for yourself. So that might mean you move from, a full-time schedule to some part-time schedule. It might mean that you get afforded more remote work days. It might be that you don't have to work in this industry anymore. It might be you don't have to work for that asshole anymore. It
Right.
might
That
be
client.
that they allow you to go to another office somewhere. But you create those opportunities to job craft through this process. And then hopefully you've improved your experience. You can now look at it and say, okay, I got what I wanted. How does it feel now? And if you're
Yeah.
like, this is great, then awesome. You don't have to move. You can stay there
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you can build on the relationships and capital that you've built in the firm and continue to grow and go wherever you want to. But if it's not available, if they say, no, we can't do that, or if they say, yes, we will do that, but then they never come through on their promise, then we move to the next stage, which is, what's out there waiting for me that I want to check out. And it might be, you move to a new firm, smaller, bigger, in between. It might be that you start your own thing. It might be that you go to private industry or a government or nonprofit. It might be that you completely change careers. It might be that you go into teaching, whatever it might be. But that process is where the coach really comes in,
Yeah.
me, because I'm asking a lot of questions like what are your values? What really lights you up? What would bring you fulfillment? Where's your purpose at out there? And let's see if we can find it. What have you always wanted to do that you haven't done? What is it you want to say you did before you get to an age where you can't do it anymore? That kind of stuff is where I show up and help those clients figure out where their next step is going to be. That's that process is the career decision.
Okay. No, it's interesting. That's why I like talking with people that just take one, like you're a coach. And so like you think about this all the time where it's like, I was that employee and I was just freaking kind of thinking about it all willy-nilly. I had no intelligent outside perspective. I was like, this sucks, but it pays well and it's better than farming or factory work. But my soul's kind of dying. But everybody's pretty pumped because I'm a CPA. So it's like, Ray's finally made it. And it's like, this kind of fuck, I don't like this. And so it's like hilarious for so many. Because again, like I know there's so many people that are going through this because like I went through this. I also had my midlife crisis, so to speak, where like, all right, like what am I doing? And yeah, thank God I had a mentor, Brad. Like he was a really cool partner, and I was just kind of came in there, and yeah, I had that conversation with him. I guess he was my coach. It's like, all right, like what I'm kind of thinking about leaving, but like, what are my options? And he honestly, like, after I kind of told him what I was doing, was like, you're probably better off like going. I already had a job offer, but I was like, hey, like, I was kind of like trying to like pit them against each other. And he was just like, nah, dude, just go on to something bigger and better. But I worked for a small CPA firm, and so it was like a
Right.
much longer opportunity. But we had to have that talk because like what I was looking for wasn't in assurance and tax work. Like I was very much like a finance minded. Like I want to manage the P&L and like have ownership of like us hitting our numbers because we would audit the our clients and their financial controllers and CFOs I thought had way more interesting lives. Like they're trying to like manage the budget and see how their cash flow is like impacting their burn
Right.
rate. Then we gotta go talk to the investors. I was like, that's at least like stressful, but it's more exciting. Like my stress is just getting these audits done before the deadlines. But that makes sense. And I guess like a question that came to my mind because I was fearful as well. And it's like it's either fearful or like we don't believe we're gonna be able to transfer from being a CPAs to accounting for a private company or the finance team of a private company. But kind of at a high level to go a little bit, into the emotional and the woo-woo side, like why do you think people are like so fearful of going into their next phase of their career? Or they have, such, struggling with beliefs of what's possible in the next phase of their career.
So I hate mayonnaise. Hate mayonnaise. I've hated mayonnaise since I was a kid.
Okay.
And every once in a while, I decide, you know what? It's been a bit. I'm going to try mayonnaise again. and I try managing it and I spit it out because it's horrible and disgusting. And I don't know why God put that on this planet, but I'll continue to kind of explore it. My palate will change, my taste will change, my interest will change over time. And who knows, maybe one day I'm going to have a sandwich and mayo on it. It's going to be the best damn thing I've ever had.
Hmm.
But I'm going to keep continuing to explore. And I think if I fixed myself, because I hated eggs when I was a kid too, and if I had fixed on that and stuck on hating eggs, I wouldn't have been able to make all the wonderful breakfasts that I make now with eggs. And my wife gives me shit because the only thing I make is as long as there's an egg in it, I'll make it. But if I had
Okay.
stuck with that bias of, I'm not going to explore, I'm not interested in trying something, eggs suck, I would have missed out on a lot of opportunity to explore some great meals and recipes. And this is the strangest analogy you probably ever expected to get in response to your question. But there's a bias that I'm a public accountant. I only know how to do this. There's a fear that my skills aren't translatable. There's
Hmm.
concern that they're not going to be able to do what they can do, and it may
Yeah.
not taste as good as this tastes, or it may not be something I enjoy as much as this. And that's all fear based. And the other thing you get to think about when you change careers, there is the technical skill of doing a job, and then there are the professional leadership skills that you bring to a job. And so a lot of public accountants have never closed the books before. They've never
Yeah.
reconciled cash themselves before. They've audited and looked at cash reconciliations, but they've never done one. They wouldn't know how to close the books or even make a journal entry if you asked them to. And so they see that as limiting
Yeah.
their career, and that I can only review audit adjustments. I can't actually propose them or make them myself. But the truth is, you can figure it out really quick. The question is, do you have the skill to move from public to private, or to independence, or to being an entrepreneur? Like, do you have the skills like leadership and being organized and being able to communicate and being able to have hard conversations and to address some of those fears? Like, those skills are what allow you to go into another profession and be successful. You learn the details. You learn those
Yeah.
little things that cause you fear that, well, I could never figure that out. Yeah, you could. It would take you a little while. You're not going to just show up and know how to do it, but your skills that you bring with you are going to allow you to learn things a lot quicker and take off a lot faster after you learn it.
No, that makes
Mayo,
sense. That
eggs.
makes sense. I like the old yeah, it's just like we have so many beliefs that we just never question, and yeah, they start somewhere in our life, but it's just you gotta stick with it and keep trying it, and just you never know what you can learn. And I always tell people it's like, well, if you could figure out how to become a CPA or do audits or do taxes in any meaningful way, you can figure out finance and how to close the books and do reconciliations, budgeting, all that good stuff. I guess like that's a kind of a good kind of question as well, kind of being mindful of our time here. There's this like stat out there, I'm sure you've seen it, where there's either like less CPAs being created than are retiring, or less accountants entering the space than retiring. So they're like, if this keeps up, we're essentially gonna like either just like run out of accountants because we just made this such a not enjoyable experience where it's like, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, it was like doctors, lawyers, accountants. Everybody knew you kind of won if you became an accountant, but that's not the last 20 years. Like everybody's kind of like tech, that it pays well and it's still cool. Whereas accounting, even if it pays well, they're ancient and you're ran by a bunch of like dinosaurs.
Boring.
So like how do you see that going forward? Like are you optimistic about accountants and CPAs turning it around to make this profession or life actually attractive to new, intelligent, capable people that they could do tech, they could do accounting. You could be a finance bro or a tech bro, but you can't be both. So like where do you see kind of the CPA as a whole or accounting as a profession trying to like remedy some of these long, bigger picture issues of like how do we get more people excited about this accounting stuff or optimistic about the future?
Well, the first thing we have to reconcile is greed. Um, Greed has kind of run a little rampant in this industry.
Oh yeah.
And there's a lot of partners making a lot of obscene amounts of money, and good for them. They worked hard to get there, and I'm
Yeah.
sure they deserve every penny. But that same greed is preventing them from investing in bringing in more folks right out of college at a wage that is competitive. It is preventing those firms from having good programs for their employees that allow them to have a better, I know some people are calling it mythical these days, but a work-life balance or some semblance of it, work-life
Yeah.
integration, whatever you want to call it. But
Yep.
greed is preventing a lot of things from happening. And there's another thing that's happening, and that's stubbornness. There's a lot of older, professionals in this industry that are set in their ways, and they want people to experience public accounting the way they had to experience it, which is a lot of
Uh-huh.
long hours and a lot of pain and a lot of weekends and a lot of,
Yeah.
all-nighters.
Sacrifice.
And if they don't come up that way, then they don't deserve to be in the firm. And we don't want to support programs that don't allow it to be the way that we had to do it. So there's greed, there's stubbornness. There has been a shift over the last couple of years, even the last year especially. Um, I'm seeing organizations like Dope CFO, Dope CFA. There's Dark Horse. Um, there's influencers out there that are speaking to this group. There's Going Concern website. There's all these different things that are popping up, and they started out being very negative, but they've started to kind of
Yeah.
turn the corner and started to be more supportive to creating a better experience in accounting. And instead of just being the jerks in the room, they're actually kind of being proponents for a better experience. And folks are taking notice. Firms are taking notice. They're noticing that they need to act. There was the pipeline pledge that came out in June of last year, which is a way for firms to sign a document that says that they're going to contribute in a positive way to the industry, and that might be in how they manage their people, or the benefits they provide, or the hours that they make people work. But that came out. That was a big deal. AI is making this industry, on the cutting edge of technology right now, and the way we're using AI in this industry and how we're streamlining and automating things. I'm not saying it's being done elsewhere, but because accounting was so old school and how it did everything, it's going to have the
Yeah.
biggest like jump, because all of a
Yeah.
sudden, so much of what was manual, so much of was the billable hour, is going to be so much different now, and so much more exciting and interesting. And instead of a lot of detailed work, you're going to be in analysis earlier. You're going to be more strategic earlier. You can be an advisor earlier than you were before. So there's a lot of opportunity coming up. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
No, no, and I really appreciate that kind of breakdown and just yeah, and it is an interesting thing and it's like an unwritten rule. It's like for sure when you're in the CPA, getting paid by them, you can't call them out for being greedy and stubborn, but not once you step away, you can call them out for their greed and stubbornness. And I very much remember like one of the elderly partners being like trying to give me shit for using a laptop. She's like, "We used to have to do everything by paper. We'd show up
Right.
with all of the clients' data. We'd select our samples from their whole, paper populations." And I was like, I just wouldn't have been an accountant in the 70s or 80s. Like I would have gotten to marketing or something. Like this just seems ridiculous. And it's like, and then for sure the greed's a real thing. And that's like a little bit more of a touchy subject. 'Cause like everybody's got to get paid. But I always just laughed. I was like, this dude can't even open a PDF and he's just
Right.
riding on the blood,
Totally.
sweat, and tears of college kids. And it's
Uh-huh.
just like this old, like Tales from the Crypts guy is like your standard CPA partner. And like, they're about to fall over getting up the stairs and it's like
Right.
how is this dude like I gotta just like kiss the ring to this guy because he's only 62 and he's gonna work till he's 72 and it's like but he's not actually gonna do anything and so it's like what do we gotta why do we have to kiss the ring to these people and so it's
Totally.
just like their stubbornness and like and even using tech like it wasn't until I made the jump and graduated to a finance professional with like a real company that had to drive profits where they're like, oh no, we're going to use tech. We're going to analyze the entire data population and we're just going to use softwares and analytics to pull out all the risky transactions because we
Sure.
have the technology now. And it was just like leaps and bounds ahead of what I was doing as like a CPA firm auditor. And I had to learn very, very quickly how to use tech and softwares. And it almost became how we audit is just how do the softwares interact with each other? Where does the data live? And so it was just like very interesting. But then full circle, I was that jerk then who then like left the CPA profession. I was like, y'all are idiots. It's like
I'm out.
we make more money, we work less hours, and we feel really cool about what we're doing. We get to fly around the world, audit
Mhm.
subsidiaries, or make sure their books are correctly, make sure they're closing it. But then I kind of have changed my tone for sure, and probably for sure this year. But like the last few months, it's like. No, 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 Ray. Like telling people their way sucks isn't going to make them want to come to our side. We got to let them know there's a better way. And honestly, because we work with a lot of CPA firms, it's like just treat your team a little bit better. Like there's ways that we can make this all easier. If you guys just talk with us on the finance side a little bit more, I can get you all your audit support a lot easier. If you use a nice little like onboarding, like a logical way to gather the support, we can make it way easier. So let's just, and this tech and the software has, improved where it's like
Wow,
made
big time.
specifically for CPA and audit firms to like work with their clients. And
There's so
so,
many choices. I mean, it's
yeah.
ridiculous the amount of software options you have. Well, one quick thing on Greed, at the regional firm I was at, they had a rule. They had a 4-to-1 rule, and
Okay.
the rule stated that the highest paid partner couldn't make more than 4 times the lowest paid partner.
Oh,
And so if the
geez.
lowest paid partner made 100 grand, the highest paid partner couldn't make more than 400. And that rule was probably a pain in the ass for the senior partners who were making all the bringing in all the business and doing a bunch of the work because they had a ceiling on how much they could earn. But it did two things. One, it allowed there to be more money to reinvest into the firm. So that firm didn't need private equity because it was putting its own money on the table to go after technology, to have good employee benefits, whatever. It was using its own funding to do that. And then the second thing, it created an incentive for the partners to develop other partners quickly and get them up the ranks because that way they'd be paid more and they would be paid more. So it was an interesting little way to combat greed.
Yeah, like aligned incentives. It's like it,
Yeah,
and that makes sense. And that's kind of what makes business fun is like if we align incentives, there shouldn't be any ceiling. As long as we can keep providing value, we
yeah.
should all be able to make a nice living. And no, that makes a lot of sense. That's awesome. No, this is going to be a really good podcast. Just kind of just thoughts on the
Good.
industry. So there's like everybody's going through, I think it's very much going through a transition. And I always joke like, I don't know when I got started, it was like but like it was close enough where like part of one of my, maybe I was pretty bad at my job, but they just had me like scanning in old tax returns
Yeah,
into
yeah,
like digitizing them so they could go into our database. And that was like
yeah.
one of my like intern level jobs. And I even remember some of the people were like kind of like weary about it. They were like, well, let's just give me that tax return. I might need it. I'm like, no, it's in the cloud now. And they're like, nah,
No,
that's a really
what cloud?
important
I don't
client,
see
Ray.
cloud.
Yeah, and so it was like I did that. Like I went through that transition of like paper to
Yeah.
digital, and now we're going through the transition of like how do we communicate with clients? How do we provide value to clients? How do we promote young people who are really, really intelligent with the softwares and techs and data analytics, kind of empower them to really move through the ranks quickly because yeah, like we don't need to lose the top talent right away from these CPA and accounting firms. And I think that's what happens because they just see a better outlet of like just becoming a financial controller or a financial director for these companies. And it's like, now we can keep it here. And what's happening too, and last little rant is like external fractional consultants, fractional accountants, fractional CFOs are becoming so popular. It's like, but you don't need to go out on your own to do that. Like you could start your own fractional CFO client advisory services within your firm. But to your point, you got to get buy-in from the whole thing, and it's got to be economically make sense. I could nerd out with you all day, Doug, on this, but I guess just to be mindful, where are you going to be kind of in 2025? What are you working on, and kind of where can people find you? And then if they want, where can they work with you, and learn from you?
So best easiest place to find me is on LinkedIn. You can find me at the CPA coach or Doug Slaybaugh, and I tend to hang out there more than any other social platform. Um, as far as 25 goes, I'm focusing a lot on my state society and helping support them and primarily the independent accountants. We're doing a lot to support that population of folks that are on their own and give them some of the same benefits that the big firms might have, just access to ideas and support so that they can be successful. Also starting a coaching program with the state society. That's going to be a big deal this year and offering that to members. Um, the CPA coach is going to continue coaching individuals across the country, coast to coast, small to big, firms and partners and supporting them in their performance. And then the practicing accountant, that's a pretty exciting space to be looking at. And I do invite you to check out our podcast at the Practicing Accountant. And again, you can find that on Apple, Spotify. Also, I don't know if should I say the link or should I give you the link or is
It'll all
that
be in
something
the
we'll
show
post
notes,
in?
but yeah, let people know.
Perfect. So if you visit us at www.thepracticingaccountant.com/dope CFO, one word, if you visit that, we're going to give you access to a tool that we created just for this audience. And there's the tool. So you've probably heard of all kinds of pricing models, and value-based pricing being one of the bigger ones you hear
Yeah.
about, as well as subscriptions and things of that nature. But but no one ever really tried to, or no one ever taught me, like, how do you actually calculate value-based pricing? Like, how do you actually come up with the value of your service to charge? And then how do you actually use that? So that annoyed the hell out of me. And I keep hearing people use value-based pricing. And I know at the end of the day, they're just sitting there with their thumb up going, try 2 grand. See if they'll go with 2 grand. So we made a tool
Okay.
that will actually help you calculate value-based price for a service. And we're going to make that available to your audience. Visit that website and you can get access to it there and try it. It might be kind of fun, but it actually puts a little meat on that bone when you're calculating value-based pricing. And it also helps you recognize the premium that you're charging and helps you reflect on why you're charging that premium.
Yeah, because we need to be mindful as well. Like just because the client will pay 30K a month and doesn't mean we have to charge 30K a month. It's like, all right, let's be mindful here. Like how greedy are we being and how much value are we really bringing to them? And man, I really appreciate that because whether you do cannabis, manufacturing, car dealerships, healthcare, it's still a way to calculate the value of what we provide people for sure. And then there is like a logical, way to do that. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you also just continuing on as the CPA coach. Like it never dawned on me how much being a CPA is part of your identity until I kind of got out of, working at a CPA firm and then more importantly got out of like a finance team where we were all ex CPAs that were still pretty high and mighty about it. And now I own my own business. I just talk with business owners all day and they make money all day and none of them are CPAs. They're not even accounting or finance professionals. So I really much like checked my ego of like, like it is such a part of my identity, but also in a good way because like CPAs, it should be a part of our identity. It's hard to get the license. You do need to really want it. You do need to kind of be committed to it. And I think there's still room to like turn it around and make being a CPA like a form of pride and like prestigiousness again, instead of just like CPAs are only, only person who likes a CPA is a fellow CPA. It's like, no, no, no. Let's try to bring this back to like bring it to a point of like the MBA, the
Yeah.
CPA. So awesome. Thanks so much for what you do, Doug. I'll let you get going. And it was a pleasure, my man. Be well.
Thanks for having me. It's been an honor.
Yep. Bye bye.
Cheers.